Hey guys, in today's video, we are going to talk about variables in JavaScript. Oops, not in JavaScript. We are going to talk about variables in CSS. And yes, you heard it right. I'm not talking about the CSS preprocessors where we know that we can define the variables and then we can use them. But I'm talking about CSS custom properties, or we say as CSS variables, which we can use natively. So we are going to style a simple layout using CSS variables, and we will see how we can do theming of our layout. So we will be using JavaScript, and we will see how we can use these variables in JavaScript and change the color when we select any theme. So if I click on the dark, then I'm going to get this dark theme. And if I click on the calm, if it's going to give me a different theme, and similarly for the light. So we can wrap this topic in 5-10 minutes, but I actually want to go deep and I want to show you how we can actually design the layouts using the variables, and we can do the theming of our web pages. All right, so let's do that. Also make sure you subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. So let's get started. All right, guys, so I have a simple HTML document here with some of the HTML code, and I'll just quickly walk through you to the HTML code. So I'm having a header which says the CSS custom properties and CSS variables. And after that, I have two sections, the section 1 and section 2. The section 1 has a div with the class of box, and that contains an h3 for a title and a paragraph with the dummy content. And similarly, I have three divs. And in the section 2, I actually have two divs with the same class box and the same content. And then I have a footer which says this is footer. And in the end, I have a simple div with three buttons, and three buttons having a text of dark, calm, and light. Right now, if we click anything, nothing happens because we haven't written a JavaScript code to change the theme. So let's start with styling the layout using the CSS variables or the custom properties. I'm going to be using the word CSS variables because that's how it is popular. All right, so let's jump to my CSS file. So this is my CSS file. I have just removed the default margin padding. And the next thing we can do is that how we can define these CSS variables. So the best place to define a CSS variables is the root element, or the root element is the HTML, the top level element of your HTML document. So you must have not seen in a lot of CSS files where you actually use this colon root, but this is the top level element of your document, which is the HTML. This is a very best place to define all your CSS variables because these properties are similarly like other properties, they cascades. All right, so the first thing we are going to do is if we want to define a variable, we use a little weird syntax, but yes, that is you use two hyphens, or you can say two minus. And after that, you actually give your property name. So I'm going to use, suppose, primary color. All right, and then you can give a value to it. So let me give a value of RGBA, and I'm going to give a value of 91, 107, and 107. Now it's very similar that if you want to give a font size, and how you can give a font size, you just give a font size of 16 pixel. All right, so in this case, you have a property called font size, and the value of the property is 16 pixel. But when you give this font size directly, the browser actually knows what the font size property is. But when you do this, the browser doesn't know what the primary color, I mean, it is not a property which a browser knows. It is a custom properties which we are defining. So that's why when you write the primary color, the browser doesn't do anything, or the color doesn't changes on the screen. All right. So I'm also going to define the secondary color. So let me have a secondary color for my website. So for the secondary color, I'm going to give a value of 40, 44, 44. All right, and then I'm going to give a margin for my containers. So let's give a margin of 10 pixel, 0 pixel, and I'm going to give a padding to my containers. So let's give a padding of 20 pixel, and we will need to have a text primary color. So I'm going to give the name of, you can define any name to a variable. I mean, it's up to you. So I'm going to define a text color primary, and the text color primary would be white, FFF. All right, so now I have defined some of the CSS variables. Now let's see how we can use these variables in our properties. So if I want to use it, so next I'm going to do, I will have a body, and in the body so I will define a variable here with the family, uh, Arial Helvetica, and I'm going to give sans serif. Sans serif. Okay, and I have misspelled the Arial. All right, so I have an Arial Helvetica sans serif, but when I added this body, the font is still the serif font. It's still not changed. Now let's use this font family variable into our font family property. So I'm going to use font family property. And if I want to use the variable, I cannot use the variable directly just writing the variable name. I have to use a var function. So to use a var function, we just write a var and then we add a parenthesis. So now if I save it, you will actually see that my fonts now gets changed. So in this way, you can actually use the custom properties or CSS variables. And let me give the color. I'm going to use the color is hyphen hyphen text color primary. All right, so I have changed the text color primary, and I can see that my primary color is white and everything is uh, disappeared because the background is also white and the primary color is also white. So let's move on with the header first. So let's style the header. So I'm going to have the header and footer. I want the same styling to both the header and footer. And for the header and footer, I need to give a background color. So I will be using a var, and my background color will be my primary color, which I have used this. So let's use this primary color. And now if I save it, you can see that I have a background to my header and the footer so that my text is now visible because the text is of white color. All right, also let's do some padding and margin to the header and footer. So I'm going to use padding, and I have already defined a variable for padding, which is padding container. All right, and I want the text align to be in center. So I'm going to use text align center. So that's what we have done. We have our header and footer, and now let's style the next part, which is our sections. So in the section, so I'm going to write a section here, and I want to have a background, a different background to a section. So I can actually add a property here, and this property will be a section background, and I'm going to give F1, F1, F1. Okay, and then let's use this background color. All right, so the background color is var, and I'm going to use the section background. So this is going to give me a color, but I want to show you one thing, that by any chance that you misspell this variable name and you save it, but it won't give you any error, because in the CSS also we see that if we misspell the padding or a margin, it actually ignores, the browser ignores the property. It don't give you an error. But in the CSS custom properties, we have a fallback. So if I misspell something, or if by some chance this value is not available, then it can use the fallback, and I'm going to give a fallback of pink. And if I save it, then you can see that I have a pink color background. So this way the fallback can work. So right now we have a proper section value. So I'm going to do this section again. So now if it finds the section BG, then it's going to use the section BG. But if any chance it doesn't find the section BG, then it's going to use the pink color as a fallback value. So now if I save it, I can get the proper F1, F1, F1 background. All right, and then I also need some padding to my section. So I'm going to use the padding. I have a variable for the padding and I can reuse the same. So this is actually the core beauty of using the CSS variables, that once you define a variable, you can actually reuse them wherever you want. And after that, if you actually want to change the value, you don't need to go on each of the places and change the value. You just change the value at one place and it gets automatically reflected all over the page. We're going to see that as well, how we can do. Okay, so in the section, so let me change the value to the black for some time. Okay, so that we can see the content. All right. So now what we want, that in the first section, which is this section, we want our 3 columns, and we are going to use the grid to generate the columns. So let's use that. So I'm going to have a section and I have a class of section1 on it, and I need to have a display grid. All right, and then I need to have a grid template columns. So I'm going to use one FR, one FR, one FR to get 3 columns. All right. So next is I want to style the boxes, the box class. So these 3 grid divs, they actually have a class of box. So let's style the box. So I'm going to use the box and I will define some CSS variables on the box. So the first is I want to have a box border, and I'm going to give a box border of solid, 1 pixel solid, and the color for the border is should be a secondary color. All right, and then I need to have a box margin. So I'm going to use 5 pixel of margin. Then I need to have a box padding. So I'm going to use 5 pixel of padding to the box, and I need to create a box shadow. So for the box shadow, I will have 2 pixel, the offset, the right offset. Then I will have a 3 pixel of the bottom offset, and I will have a 3 pixel of the blur, and then I'm going to give the color. So I will be using the secondary color. All right, and I will also have the border radius variable, so I can give the radius to my box. So I'm going to have a box radius. Okay, and I need a box radius of 3 pixel. And one thing I need to want a background to my box. So I'm going to give a box background, and the box background will be the primary color. So let's use the primary color. All right, now we have defined some variables on our box. Now let's use these values. So if I want to use these values, I will go to a box and I will define first the border. So let's go to the border, and the border will be the box border. Okay, so I defined it as box, but it should be a border. So I'm going to use this border here. All right, so now we have the borders to our boxes, and the next thing we want to do is we need to add margin so that we can get some spacing properly. So I'm going to use box margin. Then I'm going to use the padding. So let's use the padding. So I will give a box padding. Okay, then I will be using the box shadow. So to use the box shadow, we have a variable for box shadow, and we need a border radius. So to get the border radius, let's use the variable as box radius. And the last, we need to give a background. So to get a background, let's use where, and we have a box background. So that is BG. And now you can see that we have a proper styling to our boxes. And let's do a little bit of spacing between the title and the content. So for that, in the box, I have an H3, and I'm going to use padding. of variable the box padding. So I'm going to use the same box padding here so that I can get some spacing. All right, and I can do a similar to my paragraph as well. So I'm going to use for paragraph. So I'm going to do a P paragraph here. So now we have the three boxes. We have the other section with these two boxes, and I need to have a little spacing here. So this is in the section 2. So I'm going to use section dot section 2, and on the section 2 I need to have a margin bottom of 20 pixel. All right, and this margin should be able to be applied on the box. So I need to give a box here so that I get a spacing here. All right, and now I will change my color back to FFF, which was the white. Yep. All right. Now we just need to style the buttons, the dark, calm, and light button. So let's design them. So we have a theme class to it. I'm going to use a padding and variable, so we can use the same padding for the containers. All right, so now we have the padding, and I need to the text to be aligned in the center. So we will give some padding. So I'm going to define some variables on the buttons. So to define the variables on the button, I will have a button padding which I want 10 pixel and 20 pixel. All right, and I need to have a button font size. So font size, I'm going to give 1 rem. All right, and then I will be using this CSS for the buttons. So the padding will be variable btn padding. Okay, and the font size for the button is equals to variable btn font size. Okay, and the cursor pointer, let's add a cursor pointer. All right, so now we have this complete page layout using our variables. So we have used a lot of variables in our CSS. And now let's see how we can use these variables into our JavaScript file, and we can manipulate the variable values. So I have this JavaScript file which is already linked to my HTML document. So what I'm going to do, we have defined the CSS variables on the root. So first we need to change these values on the root. So if we want to change the values on the root, we need to first take a reference of the root. So for the reference of the root, what I'm going to do, I will just use a let root is equals to document dot document element. So when I do a document element, it actually give me the root of my HTML document. All right, and we will also take the reference of the buttons. So for that, I'm going to give a theme buttons, and I'm going to use document dot get, sorry, document dot query. So if you don't know how to use the query selectors and how to select the DOM, then I recommend you to watch my JavaScript crash course videos. I will add the links in the description below. So I'm going to take the selector all, and we have a class of theme, and inside the theme we have button. All right, so now we have a reference of all the buttons. So now let's loop through the button and add an event listener to the button. We will use a for each dot for each, and for each button we need to have an arrow function. All right, and on the arrow function I'm going to add event listener. So we will be add and click event listener, because when we click it, we need to change the theme of our page. And the other value is the change. I'm just going to use a method change theme. All right, so we have a change theme method now, and I'm going to write a function change theme here. Change theme, and that will get an event. All right, and let me alert first the event dot target dot value, that are we able to fetch the correct value. All right, So now if I click on the dark, you will get the dark. And if I click on the calm, you will get the calm. If I click on the light, you will get the light. Now, the thing which we want to do is when we actually click on a dark, we need to set a new primary color. That means we need to set a new value to a CSS variable. So how we can do that? So we have three themes, dark, light, and calm. So I'm going to use a switch. All right. And in the switch, I'm going to use event.target.value. All right. And the first case is if the value is dark, then on the root, which we have already a reference of the root, we need to add a style to the root. So I'm going to add a style dot, we need to set a property. And what property we need to change? If we go here, we need to change the primary color here. So we can actually use this property here, hyphen primary color, and we need to change the primary color to a new value, and I'm going to use 222 as a new value. All right, when we change the primary color, I also want to change the text color. So I'm going to use the same root style dot set property, and the set property for the text color primary will be white. So we want a white color when we change the dark theme for the text. All right, and then we need to have a break here, and for the next, so I will add a break tag here. Okay, and the next case would be, so I will just copy this. All right, and I will paste this here. Just change the indentation. Then I'm going to paste here. I will just change the indentation again. So now for the dark, we have the next is we have a calm, and the other one is the light. All right. So for the calm, the primary color we want is 5B, 6B, 6B. Color should be white. And for the light, we want F5, F5, F5. And in this case, the color should be black. All right, so we have written a sufficient amount of code to change the theme. Now let's try this. Is it working or we get some error? All right, so I'll click on the dark first. And if I click on the dark, we get the dark theme. If I click on the calm, I get a calm theme. And if I click on the light, I actually get a light theme. So this is very simple, and very easily we were able to achieve the theming, and that's because of the CSS custom properties or the CSS variables. And the advantages of using the CSS variables is that you can actually reuse your properties. And let me give you an example that if we are using a dark theme and we want to change the padding of the containers. So if I change it one place here, let me change it to 10 pixel, you will see that it automatically changed throughout the page. And if I make it to 30 pixel, it's going to change everywhere in the page. So I don't need to go each and every place and change the values. And this is the power of using the CSS variables. So it's actually give you a lot of reusability of the properties. It's also supportable to all the modern browsers except IE, which it's not a complete supportable. But yes, it's better to use custom variables and using the preprocessors, because when you use the preprocessors, you need to compile it and then it is being used. But if you use the native CSS variables, you can do it without any compilations, and it's really fast as compared to the processors where a compilation is required. So guys, that's all I had to show you about the CSS variables and about the theming. I hope you like the video. A thumbs up is appreciated. You can also connect with me via Facebook or Instagram. I will add the links in the description below. And also make sure you subscribe my channel and press the bell icon so that you get these awesome videos. Thanks for watching.